Okay. Adam Wason, Public Works Director for the City of Bloomington. It is just after 5:30 p.m. here on Tuesday, September 12th, 2023. This is the regularly scheduled Board of Public Works meeting. We're here in City Council chambers. There's also a Zoom link on the agenda. We do have quite a few folks attending via Zoom. Just mentioned that there are multiple places for public comment this evening. Under petitions and remonstrances, that is for items that are not on the agenda, and then each agenda item will have opportunities for public comment. If you're wanting to make public comment via the Zoom link or on Zoom, we just ask when the time comes that you use the raise hand function or the chat function for that, and we'll make sure to offer you that time. Otherwise, I will turn it over to Kyla Cox-Deckard, Board President.
Thank you. I call to order this regular meeting of the Board of Public Works this Tuesday, September 12th of 2023. First up, we have messages from board members. Do we have any messages from the board?
I have none.
All right. Next is petitions and remonstrances. This is the opportunity to make public comment on something that is not on the agenda this evening. So if you would like to make public comment about something not on the agenda, now is the opportunity to do so. If you are on Zoom and would like to make comment, you're welcome to use the raised hand function or the chat function. If you're here in the room and would like to make comment about something not on the agenda, you can approach the microphone. Did you have a comment about something not on the agenda?
A tower that's being built on the north end is on the agenda tonight.
There is a related project on the agenda for that, so we will call for public comment on.
Make a comment about that if you'll tell me the appropriate time to do
Sure.
so.
Yeah, we will. Thank you. Any comments on Zoom?
Not under petitions and remonstrances, no.
All right, seeing none. Next is a Title VI abatement request. First is request for abatement at Ashland Park Drive.
Hello, I'm Rebecca Davis. I work for the Housing and Neighborhood Development Department. I'm a neighborhood compliance officer, and I have put in a request for an abatement of, parcel 53-05-333-020-023.002-005. I don't know if I need to do that next time, because I have two of these. But anyhow, the property is very overgrown. It's not being managed in any way whatsoever in that regards. I started issuing notices of violation on July 3rd, all the way up until August 24th. Starting with the warning and then stepping up through the $50, $100, $150 ticket, which also notified them of the that I was going to come here to see if I could get an abatement.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And this property is adjacent to the property that is the next item.
That's
on
correct.
And they're both owned by the same property owners or different?
Yes, same property owners.
As we discussed during the work session yesterday, the property owner appears to be a group out of Atlanta. Did we ever find out if they own any other property locally?
I believe they do have some other parcels here locally. What we have found, though, is that it's likely that LLC is, oh, nope, Colleen's coming up. I'm going to stop talking.
Thanks.
Colleen Newville, City Legal. They own one other parcel. It's actually on Ashland Lane as well, so it looks like maybe they look like they're all one. But I have been informed, and I'll just address that. The state of Indiana has actually revoked the business's authority to have a business in Indiana, and it looks like they haven't administratively dissolved in Georgia. So they've not dissolved the company on their own, but all of the information that we have is where we've been sending the information to.
Okay.
So
All right, well,
And
that's
I think
informative.
that's actually a good point to kind of, to focus on, is that's not exactly why this provision in code exists, but it is a very helpful provision. We have a LLC that owns property that's not maintaining the property, that's been dissolved, we cannot contact the owners, and that's where the abatement comes in. That abatement then, the cost of goes on to the property tax bills
Correct.
for a lien on the property, and so that's kind of what this is intended for in the end, really, to make sure we have that ability, so.
Happy to answer any questions if you have any more.
Thank you. Any other questions on this item? Any public comment on this item?
There's nothing on Zoom for this item.
All right, seeing none. Is there a motion on this item?
I move that we approve the request for abatement at Ashland Park Drive.
And I second. I will call the roll. Corone?
Aye.
Cox-Deckard, aye. Motion passes. Next, we have request for abatement at West 11th Street. And you don't have to repeat
I don't
that
have to
parcel
repeat all
number
the
again. We
things.
won't.
Okay, so, yeah, like we discussed, this is an adjacent property to the one I was just speaking about. And I'm requesting that we be able to abate that parcel as well.
Thank you. Any questions on this item? Any public comment on this item?
There's no comment on this item.
Is there a motion?
I move that we approve the request for abatement at West 11th Street.
All right, I second. I will call the roll. Corone? Aye. Cox-Deckard, aye. Motion passes. All right, next up is consent agenda. Under the consent agenda is Resolution 2023-62, IU Homecoming Parade, Addendum Number 1 to 2023 Corson Fire and Security Service Agreement, and approval of payroll. Do we have any items that need to be removed from the consent agenda? Seeing none. Do we have any public comment on anything within the consent agenda? Okay. Seeing none, is there a motion on the consent agenda?
I move that we approve the consent agenda for tonight's meeting, September 12th, 2023.
And I second. I will call the roll. Corone?
Aye.
Cox-Deckard, aye. Motion passes. Next up, we have new business. First under new business is lane and sidewalk closure request from Reed & Sons for the Bloomington Gateway Project at Miller Showers Park. This is September 18th, 2023 through December 8th of 2023.
Hi, it's Alex Gray from engineering. So Reed & Sons is working with the Parks Department for the Miller Showers Gateway Project, and they are going to have a road closure on Old State Road 37, which is actually in between North Walnut and North College Avenue. It's the two through paths. That's the area of the closure. There will be a lane that's about 2 days that'll happen on, I forget the exact dates, but it's early in the timeline. I think it's like on the 20th or something. Yeah. And those will be on the west side, but it'll only be a lane of Old 37. There will not be any affecting to North Walnut or North College. Both of them will be open, and there will be sidewalk and bike lane closures and stuff too associated with it, but it's all toward the park area and will not affect College in them. And then the packet should have detour paths and everything.
Thank you. Are there questions on this item?
I have none.
Okay. So we talked in the work session yesterday about the fact that this is in the corridor that has been recently studied. I appreciate we received the construction documentation that shows a little bit better the view of the
sidewalk path.
areas that are going to be impacted as far as improvements being made in the right-of-way to, roadway areas. So I'm still trying to get a handle on exactly what improvements are being made in the right-of-way. So the area, the old 37 segment, I think earlier I referred to it as a squished roundabout. I'm sure that's the technical engineering term. And then the sidewalk, it's my understanding that the sidewalk is in, with exception of the right-of-way proper, it's in the park.
Yes.
Like, it is not what we would think of as a sidewalk.
Yeah.
I guess I'm still trying to figure out if the sidewalk improvement is part of a public works managed.
I know the main piece is more the road closure part. I think the sidewalk portion is more of the awareness that they're not going to be able to cross at the old 37. So those two sections, they're going to have to detour around and come back to the park. And I think that was kind of more, it's not like an actual, I think that's it. I don't think there's actually a sidewalk closure.
So let me clarify, though. I think what you're asking more so is what improvements are being actually made, not what is being closed. So, and Tim Street with Parks and Rec is here as well, so we'll probably have to rely on Tim for some of this. There will be, please correct me as soon as I say anything wrong, Tim. There will be some internal sidewalks to the Parks and Recreation property that is part of Miller Showers Park that require some of these right-of-way requests. And then there's a section of sidewalk being added on the west side of College, and we refer to it as the Steak and Shake parcel, but where the old Steak and Shake was, there's a section of sidewalk being added there as a connection piece. But Tim, can you kind of talk more about what other improvements are being made and facilitated within the right-of-way? Sure.
I also want to make a note that the sidewalk piece that's on North College is happening right now. That was a separate permit that we did. So that is being added right now, and they're getting ready to pour it tomorrow morning, I think. Or, well, not quite tomorrow morning, but tomorrow is the plan.
That's the area that's on the map.
Yes, yes, yes. So it shows it on the map there because this permit will be after that has been installed. So we wanted to make sure it was clear that this detour path shows the new sidewalk already.
And quick question, since we're talking about that specific segment of sidewalk, is that being funded by the Parks Bond, or is it being funded by Public Works?
Yep.
Okay.
He's got that.
Hi, Tim Street, Operations Director for Bloomington Parks. Good to see you. Thanks for having me this evening. Yeah, Adam, I can help shed some light on a little bit of the project aspects that are improvements in the public right-of-way. So, of course, a big part of it is the art piece itself, but there are also associated improvements at that north end of Miller Showers Park. So part of that is sidewalk connectivity. That north end of the park is becoming an increasingly important connector as we see some densification, especially east of the park there, with the Verve and the future, I don't remember what it's called, development coming in though. So there's a crossing there. We're going to be adding a light to that crossing. It's missing a light right now. And then on the Gorley Pike crossover, or Old 37 crossover, depending on how you call that, whatever you want to call that, there's a pedestrian refuge island that's very beat up, that's been hit by all manner of trucks and has a lot of rough landscaping that grows at a height that makes it really hard to see through as well. So part of the project is revamping that pedestrian refuge island. It's going to rebuild some of the broken concrete, some of the broken curbs. Actually, a portion of the Gorley Pike crossover will be milled and resurfaced. That is why part of that will be closed. There'll be new PED detectable warnings on the curb ramps going to that pedestrian refuge in west to College. And then, as Alex mentioned, because of a missing section of sidewalk at Steak and Shake, there was no good way to have an MOT in place for a detour on the west side of the park there. And so we are able to fund that improvement from the Parks Bond as part of this project as well. So that is going in here first at the beginning of the project. And as mentioned, that specifically is not in this right-of-way permit, but it is related, and I'm just trying to answer that question.
So this closure that's before us tonight is meant to support all of the improvements that you just listed off, including the pedestrian island and the milling of the street.
Correct.
The new light,
That would be
et
the
cetera.
reason for the however many days, I forget they had in their closure of Gorley Pike when needed, when they're actively working there. When they're not, they'll have it open for traffic to go through. And then also for the pedestrian detour because of the sidewalks, which Kyla is correct. Some of them are maybe public right-of-way sidewalks, some of them are parks internal, but they all form one system that people use to transport through the area.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And so the sidewalk that we see on the construction document that, comes in from that pedestrian refuge and into the park, is that in existence as it's laid out now?
Not as it's laid out now. It's a little bit different.
Okay.
We're going to make some improvements to it and do some regrading of that area as well, because there's a bit of a berm in there, so it's going to get flattened out a bit more as well.
Okay.
So reconstructed, I guess, is the term I would use for portions of that sidewalk.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I hadn't had to think about the way that sidewalks are managed that are inside of parks until thinking about this particular project, because so often, the sidewalk is part of the right-of-way, it's part of Public Works.
Yeah.
And it occurred to me that in this situation, some of the sidewalk is probably not Public Works, and some of it
Correct.
is. So
And
thanks.
it's hard to draw a line exactly where that occurs sometimes, but we try to look at it interdepartmentally as a whole system and maintain that connectivity.
And then Parks manages some of the greenery that exist in those refuge points, right?
Correct.
So that is, I'm assuming, being impacted by this update, like the pedestrian refuge, when it's reconstructed, will be like sort of replanted, everything will be like updated.
And a lot of it will actually be converted to hard surface.
Okay.
Because of the issues, we have a lot of problems maintaining landscape plants in medians and right-of-way because of the need for closures and safety factors and things like that. So oftentimes they don't get the care that we would like for them to have, and so a lot of this is going to be replaced with a hardscape ped refuge. But there will be other landscaping and street trees throughout the project.
Okay.
And if you wouldn't mind, President Deckard, I would like to just make a point too. I do know we have a lot of folks on the Zoom link, and I'm pretty certain they're here for this topic as well. And I want to make a point and a note to folks. What's before the Board of Public Works tonight is requests for the use of the right-of-way. That is within your purview as the board, and is one of the main reasons you are why the board exists. You're responsible for managing the public right-of-way. So these sidewalk closure requests and these uses of the right-of-way that is before you today are separate from some of the other topics that I think we're going to hear some of the public commenters want to talk about: the actual art piece, the expenditures for that art piece, et cetera. I want to be clear with folks, the Board of Public Works had no role in approving the selected art piece. They had no role in approving the funding for the projects. This is a project that's funded through the bicentennial bonds from 2018 that were approved by the City Council, that the Parks Department's been working with the Arts Commission and others on. So I think we're going to hear a lot of comments against the project as a whole, which is the Gateway project, but what's before you today is actually a request for the use of right-of-way. And if we need to, I've got some more comments from City Legal that I may make later, but in the end, the point from City Legal is that your role is to consider the request for the public right-of-way use. And so that's what I just want to make sure you're aware of. And we can talk more as we need throughout the meeting, so.
Yeah, thank you. You said the word expenditure, a common word in Public Works, although these are not our expenditures. These are expenditures, like we are not approving the Reed and Sons contract. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. That was my memory, was that we didn't have this as.
The Reed and Sons contract for this project is managed by the Parks Department and the Board of Parks Commissioners.
Right. How much, I, like others, have been reading the information about the project. And one thing that I think was somewhat confusing because of the way sometimes headlines are crafted is that there's somewhere around $1 million being spent on the Gateway project, but a large portion of that is for excavation and improvements of these elements. So if I could just get a better understanding of the expense of the update and the elements that would be considered the public works related elements, that would be helpful. And it can be ballpark. I'm not asking for like detailed budgetary sheet, just wanted to have a better understanding that it's not that price is paying for a single piece of artwork. It's actually paying for a lot of this infrastructure, and I just wanted to hear a little bit more about that.
Correct. As mentioned, yeah, there's various improvements to the north end, including removal of trees, replanting of trees, just improving the north end of the park in general. The contract with Bomar Industries, which is the special metal fabricator out of Beech Grove, Indiana, that's going to manufacture the actual art piece, I believe was right around $400,000. So the remaining balance would be the other public improvements.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, thanks.
Mhm.
Any other questions? All right. We're going to go ahead and open it up to public comment. I would be curious to just get a sense of how many people we have who are interested in making comment, just so we ensure that everyone has enough time to do that. So if you are on Zoom and interested in making public comment, if you can indicate that either by raising your hand or putting a comment in the chat, and perhaps you already have indicated that, then we can get a sense of numbers of people who are interested in making comment. And then likewise, if you're in the room, if you could just give me a little wave, then that helps me to.
I have 3 raised hands on Zoom and also a chat
Comment.
message.
Okay, so probably 4. We could.
Yes.
So 6 total.
Oh.
Are all these folks?
Actually, 5 now.
Okay.
Do we have anyone that's waiting to get in the meeting at the top?
No, it would show me.
Okay.
Okay. Let's go ahead and dedicate 3 minutes per commenter to public comment. I think first, if it's okay, I'm going to go ahead and have the people who are here in the room approach the microphone, and then we'll turn it to Zoom just to keep our management a little bit smoother. So if you are in the room and would like to make a public comment, you are welcome to approach the microphone.
Would you two like one of us to time that, or are you comfortable? Okay, thank you.
There's a timer up there, but I don't know how to use it.
And if you can just state your name for us, please.
Yes, my name's David Ebbinghaus. And I understand that you don't have any control or power over the selection or the manufacture of the so-called artwork. But this is a public forum, and I would like to have my opinion made public. So I just read about this 2 days ago in the paper, and there was no mention there of the Jean-Paul Dario sculptures, which is right next to this area that you're talking about tonight. And I just wrote an article for The Writer. It's in the previous issue and the one that's out now about the artistic legacy of Jean-Paul Dario and this sculpture in particular. So I was very concerned that this tower would not dwarf in scale the Dario sculptures. They were put in the park in 1980 down in the bottom of the valley, and it was only in, I think, 2002 that it was finally, when the park was redone, put in its present position. And it's wonderful the way it is now. It's on a human scale. This tower that's being proposed is not on a human scale, and they're calling it an artwork, but it has, as an artist, I say, in my opinion, it has no artistic value. So I put on my Facebook page asking people what they thought of it. I had nobody who was in favor of it, and many disparaging comments. And the opinion of the people that responded, I guess in my social group, the people I know and the people that read what I write, were not only against it, but were outraged. And they felt that there was no public transparency because most of them, and I also had only, what I had heard was that the Gateway project was going to be a sign over the Arlington Road pedestrian overpass. But then all of a sudden I read in the paper that it's a done deal, contracts have already been awarded. Supposedly they got advice, paid for advice, bad advice. So in any case, I want to make it known that this is going to have a terrible backlash. People are going to see this as not the best face of Bloomington that's being presented. And in view of other social problems that are, I won't even go through all the problems that we have, human problems that require research and understanding as well as human compassion. This has nothing to do with this. This is like a vanity project. So I just want to put it on record that this is a bad idea, bad design, bad placement of no artistic value, and it doesn't fit in the park. So thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate your comment. All right, we have another person in person who would like to make a comment.
Hello, my name is Mark Robleski. I'd like to thank the departments that have worked on this, Public Works and Parks and Rec Department. I think that's a great idea, redoing all the infrastructure and line of sights and making it more pedestrian accessible and bicycle. But I agree with the gentleman before me. This is not artwork. This monolith is the ugliest thing I've ever seen, and it will come back to harm us. I just wanted to go on record to oppose it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I think we've heard from the comments here in the room, so if we could go ahead and start with the first person in the queue on Zoom, that would be great.
Okay, I'll read the chat first, and it's from Jane Goodman. She states that, I appreciate your attention to the public right-of-way. The right-of-way that you are considering is only for humans, however. I'm concerned about the avian right-of-way. Miller Showers was built to be a lovely habitat for birds and waterfowl. I walk frequently there. While I welcome any sidewalk improvements, I am making use of, sorry, it's not scrolling properly. It scrolled all the way down. I apologize.
You're fine.
I'm making use of the only public forum we have about this project to ask you to add avian welfare to your consideration. If you can use your authority in any way to relocate the gateway sculpture to a more appropriate location, it would be wonderful. And then I will just start from the top on the raised hands.
Okay,
So, Susan, I am going to ask you to unmute if you would please state your comment.
Full name too, please.
And
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
yes, can you please state your full name?
Sure. I'm Susan Brackney. It sounds as if you're expected to rubber stamp the use of the right-of-way. I would just say perhaps by denying that use even temporarily, that could facilitate further discussion. This thing has been in the works for 5 years and is said to reflect the ideas of residents. As I understand it, residents and the city staff and Bloomington Arts Council, which that's 11 people, it's not a lot of people. I'm wondering what residents offered feedback, when, how many. This is the first that most of us have heard of this or seen this 40-foot tall illuminated monument. And it seems to be a foregone conclusion that we'll have this monolith whether we want it or not. I'm wondering a few things. Is this green monument going to be solar powered? Of course, right? But if not, why not? I've read that it will feature an internally lit soft glow and that it is not designed to shine up or out in an unshielded way so that it won't be a significant source of light pollution. I wonder what other projects like this the Indianapolis-based firm has designed that can be pointed to so that we don't just have to take their word for it that this is going to be okay. Will you all or will they be consulting with the folks from Dark Sky International? How many lumens will it emit? I know it changes colors. That's great. Will they have the ability to dim the LEDs if, say, wildlife conservationists deem them to be too bright or too disruptive? Maybe they're already planning to consult area ornithologists and work out a go dark schedule to accommodate heavy bird migration times. That would be a compromise of sorts, and I think that's what real input looks and sounds like. I have to say, if we really wanted a green monument which reflects where we've been and where we need to go, maybe we would have used some Indiana limestone. Could be combined with a futuristic metal trellis and darkness. You could train a live woolly Dutchman's pipevine to grow up the whole thing. That's an Indiana native plant which reaches like 30 feet high and hosts the pipevine swallowtail butterfly. That probably wouldn't cost quite so much of that bond money. Then you could spring for more trees or just more mature trees with the savings. Anyway, as it is, with the source of the funds being used and the specific amount being under a certain threshold, they've cleverly sidestepped the need for widespread public input. And in that sense, this whole debacle does accurately reflect what Bloomington has become. And that's a shame to me. Thanks for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you.
Can I interrupt with one question? We are obviously not the board to take up some of Ms. or all of Ms. Brackney's questions. Where can residents with those questions go to receive some feedback and answers?
So just the Parks General email, or yeah, so we can make sure to include that in the chat and other areas, the direct emails to the Parks and Recreation Department, who are spearheading the effort, and we'll put that in the chat, but I'll get the general Parks email.
Thank you.
All right, we're ready for the next public comment.
And actually, real quick, so it is as the email address for the Parks Department is as easy as parks@bloomington.in.gov. But we'll also make sure to get that list of questions, and I know Tim's here taking notes, so you know, we'll be making sure to document those and get those to Parks as well.
Thanks.
I just put that in chat for everybody,
Okay,
so they
thank
could
you.
see that. So I have Pileated online, and I've asked her to ask you to unmute. Can you please state your name?
Hi, my name's Susan Lepselter, and I put my comment into the chat, but I'll just basically read it, unless you'd rather.
Please go ahead.
Okay, so I first agree completely with both Jane Goodman's comment above and with the comment we just heard. And I understand that many of the objections to this, you know, very expensive project have been answered with the, when people have said, well, we have so many needs in Bloomington, one answer has been, but this is, you know, this is a special bicentennial fund. And I understand that this Gateway Art is part of a bicentennial bond, but you know, I'd just like to suggest that we can think outside the box. A bicentennial commemoration doesn't have to be a gigantic tower. There are many ways to commemorate our landmark event with a project specific to our own values and aspirations. Like, for example, we could honor the local environment with an investment in native prairie grasses or wetland habitats. We could explicitly recognize what people wanted and aspired to historically with an investment in housing and food security in a way that would be, you know, framed as a commemoration. So there's many ways to think about this bicentennial in a way that would not disrupt the water birds and animals whose habitat is in this location. And I would just, you know, if possible, like us to be able to think outside the box about what a bicentennial artwork could be.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have, and I apologize if I mispronounce names, Cappy's iPad. I'm going to ask you to unmute and please give us your name, please. There, it's unmuted.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, my name is Cappy Phillips, and I have to agree with all the above speakers. A couple of questions that I had as a local artist who's been in this community for quite a few years. In the past, when we've had public art projects, there's always been a call for artists to submit their designs. In this case, I don't ever recall seeing anything asking local artists about any type of call for entries for a design like this. And I was wondering why that didn't occur, if this particular bicentennial bond was different than any of the other types of art projects we've hosted in this community. I also question the idea of ongoing maintenance, how this project would be funded in the future. It seems like there could be issues with lighting, maintenance, whatever, and where do those funds come from? Again, I just would like to go on the record as saying I'm totally against this idea, and the idea of calling it an art project is, I can't agree with the idea that this concept is considered art. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you.
Okay, next up we have Valda, and I'm going to ask you to unmute and please state your name.
Hi, my name is Valda Hillary, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I understand that this group is not the one in control of this project. However, this seemed like the only near-term opportunity to speak, and I wanted to be here to represent a public that is clearly kind of like gobsmacked by this whole proposal. Most of them had not heard of it, as previous speakers had said. If any of you get online and follow the Bloomingtonian or the HT, you'll see that there are more comments on this article than anything I've seen in months and months. I agree with all the very good previous comments, questions, and suggestions. I totally am behind all of that. My primary concerns are with the light pollution and the impact on Jean-Paul Derrio's current sculpture. Again, I feel like that is a beautiful piece that serves as an entryway to Bloomington and has for a long time, and I feel like this is going to really diminish the value of that piece. The location of this proposal, I think, is really not well thought through. I do recall a year or two ago filling out some survey that talked about a couple different proposals, including the one over the bypass bridge and this one, and I expressed all of those concerns at that time. I'd really like to see the results of that survey. I'd like to know how many people actually saw the survey, filled it out, and what the comments were about that. As previous speakers have mentioned, it is said that the public had input on this, but I really am not clear how widespread that was. I also was on a previous iteration of the City Arts Commission, and I cannot imagine our group would have ever approved a project like this. It doesn't represent Bloomington, it doesn't represent our history, and it hopefully does not represent our future. So thank you again for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
And our last hand raised is Betty Rose. Betty, can you please unmute and state your name?
Yes, I can do that. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I endorse the previous speakers who are all much more eloquent than I will be. You will notice that
Betty, I'm sorry, can you please state your name for the record?
Betty Rose Nagel.
Thank you.
Okay, yes. I endorse all the previous eloquent speakers who have approached this from several different orientations, I think. One is aesthetic, one concerns the natural setting and the wildlife, one concerns using perhaps natural materials. Everything that I have heard the speakers say is something that somebody needs to pay attention to. I think that what the people who are attending in person and on Zoom are asking you to do is something like jury nullification. You, right now, are the people who can stop this. You can do it right now. It may be beyond your purview. It may not be exactly what you thought you were coming here to do. It's a tough lift. It's a big ask. But that's what we're asking. I hope you will do that. Please do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comments?
There are no additional comments.
Let's get it out of the chat.
Nope.
All right. Because we did receive so many questions about public input, I know we listed the parks email, but I'm curious what has been the process up to this point for receiving feedback from the public about the project, since we are the public forum.
Sure. Tim Street, Operations Director for Bloomington Parks again. This whole project started long before I was with the city, so I can't speak to some of the early things that were done when this project kicked off in 2018, 2019, 2020. But I do know historically that at that point, the firm was secured to look at various different locations around town that could have the necessary land, the necessary use to put in different gateways, and different gateways were conceptualized at that time. And then when COVID hit, I think everything kind of was paused. And then things were revamped again in 2022. And at that time, a couple locations were looked at more seriously. One was the Arlington Bridge, I heard that mentioned, and the other was the very north end of Miller Showers Park because of its proximity to what I believe is the busiest intersection in town, where a lot of people come in and out of Bloomington. At that time, some more concepts were conceptualized, and then I believe it was in December of last year, they were shown to the Board of Park Commissioners. There was a public forum in the lobby of City Hall to showcase those, and they went onto the park's website for a number of weeks for people to comment and feedback on. And I know we did receive comments and feedback. I couldn't tell you the number of that right now. From there, Bloomington Arts Commission was also consulted for some feedback on that preliminary design. Some adjustments were made through early this year, and then the final result was arrived at. So that was the process.
And then this was a question that I've been curious about. It's outside of the, right-of-way. But the existing sculpture, what is happening with the existing sculpture?
It will remain in its location.
Okay, so it's staying in the same place. Okay, all right. I
Thanks.
was curious about that myself. Okay, thank you. So this is a little bit of an odd item for us, I think, because it is both, it's a parks project that impacts public works, requires use of the right-of-way, but it's also an improvement of the right-of-way. And I'm not clear on what the remaining process going forward looks like. I'm also not clear on, as we discussed in the work session yesterday, the interface of all of this activity with the overall corridor plan or the timeline of the corridor plan. And so I tried finding it today to see if I could figure out when the corridor, like there was the whole phase of talking about the corridor, and then there's going to be like a proposed corridor plan, but I don't think that date has been set, like as to when the corridor plan.
And I spoke with Andrew Seabour, city engineer, and others about the corridor study. There are so many unknowns of the corridor study of what potential impacts or projects could come of that. There were some early conceptual designs I recall seeing with like a roundabout at this location, things like that. There are no decisions on that. There is no funding for that at this time. It's a plan that's being studied. So the unknowns of what that could be 3, 5, 10 years from now are just that. They're unknowns. There are no, there have been no accepted final studies on this, no accepted plans, nowhere close to construction documents type of thing. So that part's just the unknown. We, as city staff, and talking with Andrew and others, are comfortable with the right-of-way improvements that are being made, given that the unknowns of the corridor study are that unknown. There are some really great short-term improvements here. There's some sidewalk connections, like the Steak and Shake one. So that part of it, from a right-of-way perspective in the future, is what we know, is that it's not been decided. So I can address that part.
And I'm not expecting you to have the answer to this. I just want to put that out there before I ask this question. When are the consultants to deliver a proposed
A final report on the corridor study?
Corridor study.
Yeah, please.
Scott Robinson, Director of Planning and Transportation. The College Walnut study is in process. We're still collecting public comment. One of the things that they have is a steering committee. As part of that steering committee process, they will be reviewing a rubric to score various metrics in the corridor and come up with 2 preferred alternatives. So timeline, generally looking maybe next 6 months before there'd be a preferred alternative revealed at that. So right now, we're still working with the community and the steering committee to arrive at how to score the various variables they're looking at the corridor to become at those 2 preferred alternatives.
Okay.
So we're still in the process very much in that.
Okay, that makes sense. I don't know who answers this question. Is there an expiration on the bond funding?
Yeah, I don't know that, I don't have an answer for you.
Okay. Any follow-up questions?
So I'm wondering if there's a way to pick apart what's before us. If we are approving these lane and sidewalk closure requests for improvements within the Department of Public Works, as opposed to...
So I want to clarify, you're not approving improvements for the Department of Public Works. What you're approving is the use of right-of-way to facilitate improvements that Parks and Recreation is making within the park and within the right-of-way. These aren't Public Works projects, these aren't contracts that are coming before you for approval to make any of these improvements. What you're being asked of tonight is for the use of the right-of-way to facilitate the projects.
which are Parks projects.
Which is a Parks project, which is funded through the bicentennial bond. So I want to be cautious on the wording we're using here. This is not a Public Works project. There's very specific language in state code of what a Public Works project is. That is not what this is. This is a Parks bond-funded project that has some impacts within the public right-of-way. What the board is being asked to do is being asked to approve the use of the right-of-way, which falls under your purview.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. That's helpful.
Because and I'll just add, there is a comment that came in after public comment asking if we could split the question to say, yes for this, but no for that. That's not what we're here, that's not within your purview for this evening, no.
Yeah, that, if I'm not mistaken, would be a Parks decision. It also has to do with the appropriation of the funding.
Correct.
So there might be it would have to be reappropriated potentially if it were, if the project were no longer a gateway project, for example.
Yeah, and I'm not a bond attorney or anything else, so I won't offer comment on, but the bicentennial bond had gateway projects as the targeted intended use for the funding. Right. If that changes, I'm sure there would be other processes. If to change this project to a pavement maintenance project using the same funding would require legislative, major changes to the language that put forward that bond funding. So.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. Well, seeing as we don't have all the answers, and we're not going to have all the answers, I'm fully aware of that, I'd like to table this item.
Again, I just remind the board that the purview of which you're being asked to approve is the use of the public right-of-way and not the art project, not the spending. If that is the board's desire, that is not my suggestion this evening. I am asking for the approval of the use of the right-of-way per the board's purview.
Yeah, and I very much respect that, and I'd like us to table.
I support that as well.
All right, so I've made a motion to table this item. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. I will call the roll. Carone?
Aye.
Cox-Deckard, aye. Item is tabled. Next up is right-of-way vacation request for Hopewell West.
Good evening. Scott Robinson, Director of Planning and Transportation. What's before you tonight is a request of vacating 2 alleys in the Hopewell neighborhood. As you may recall, there was a similar request for one of the earlier phases, Phase 1 East. As part of this process, the alley vacation or right-of-way vacation will need to go before City Council. This is the first step of that process. There are 2 existing alleys that are in the southwest quadrant of the former IU hospital site on 2nd and Rogers. They're about 12 feet wide. One's north-south, one's east-west. With the process of replatting the neighborhood, the Hopewell neighborhood, there will be a new east-west alley created in the close proximity of the existing alley, except it'll be 20 feet wide. There will be a north-south pedestrian easement to reflect generally where the north-south alley was to again create a similar connectivity as part of that development. We have notified area utilities. We have not heard any concerns or conflicts with existing utilities in this location. It's been largely used as a surface parking lot for as long as most of us can remember. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. I do believe we have a consultant through Crossroads Engineers on the call tonight if there's any other questions. Thank you.
So as was brought up at yesterday's work session, this was supposed to go before the Plat Commission yesterday afternoon. I'm just wondering the results of that meeting.
I was not there, unfortunately. I was at another engagement at Utility Service Board meeting. So I believe it went through primary plat, but again, in order for us to get the secondary plat, we have to get the right-of-way vacation completed. And just for the record, for the platting, there's a primary and secondary. So primary is just the first step. So with what would have been part of the process is a contingency that these alleys would be vacated before our secondary or plat is completed at that process.
Any other questions? Any public comment on this item? Seeing none, is there a motion on this item?
I move that we approve the right-of-way vacation request for Hopewell West.
And I second. I will call the roll. Carone?
Aye.
Cox-Deckard, aye. Motion passes. Next up is approval of public improvements bond for Ridgefield neighborhood sidewalks.
Hello, Maria McCormick from City Engineering. For you tonight, we have a request for the acceptance of the public improvement bond amount for Ridgefield subdivision, Section 5, Phase 1 sidewalk and curb ramp modifications. This is a project that originally received secondary plat approval in 2009. These are public improvements that have never been accepted by the city as they didn't meet our requirements. They will be reinstalling and rebuilding these items once we have their bond. So we ask that you accept the bond so that we can move forward for the neighbors.
Questions on this item? Any public comment on this item? All right. Is there a motion?
I move that we approve the public improvements bonds for Ridgefield neighborhood sidewalks.
And I second. I will call the roll. Carone?
Aye.
Cox-Deckard, aye. Motion passes. Next up is approval of public improvements bond for Osage Place Phase 2.
So this is for the Habitat for Humanity project that is down by the RCA Park. Osage Place Phase 2 received secondary plat approval last night at the Plat Committee meeting. So we are asking that you accept their public improvement bond amount so that they can start on the public improvements for the second phase of the much-needed housing that they provide for our community.
Thank you. Questions on this item? Any public comment on this item? All right, is there a motion?
I move that we approve the public improvements bond for Osage Place Phase 2.
And I second. I'll call the roll. Crone? Cox Deckard, aye. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thanks. Next up is change order number 1 to contract with C.E. Hughes Milling, Inc. for pavement markings.
Yes, Adam Wason, Public Works Director for the City of Bloomington. This is a change order, just over $10,000 to take the total contract to just over $190,000. This was for additional pavement markings through our contract for long line and crosswalk/pavement markings. Throughout the contract, we decided we wanted to add additional crosswalks and additional locations, and that covers this additional cost. Request your approval.
Thank you. Questions on this item? Any public comment on this item? All right, seeing none, is there a motion?
I move that we approve change order number 1 to the contract with C.E. Hughes Milling, Inc. for pavement markings.
And I second. I will call the roll. Crone?
Aye.
Cox Deckard, aye. Motion passes. Next up is Resolution 2023-63, exchange of property between City of Bloomington and the City of West Lafayette.
Yeah, so Adam Wason again. This is part of Indiana code, allows cities to exchange property or sell property to one another for for uses amongst the various cities. So we have a sanitation truck that is not meeting our needs due to some size issues. The city of West Lafayette would like to purchase that from us, and then we're going to use the proceeds of that purchase to then go ahead and purchase a smaller truck that meets our needs. Request your approval, and we did get notification that the Board of Public Works in West Lafayette approved their resolution for that tonight.
Any questions on that item? No. All right, any public comment on this item?
There is nothing on Zoom.
All right, do we have a motion?
I move that we approve Resolution 2023-63, the exchange of property between the City of Bloomington and the City of West Lafayette.
And I second. I will call the roll. Crone?
Aye.
Cox Deckard, aye. Motion passes. Next up is staff reports and other business.
No reports today.
Okay, thank you. Next up is approval of claims. Are there any questions on the claims? I'm getting to my claims, just one second. Okay. Any public comment on claims?
There's nothing on Zoom.
Okay. Is there a motion?
I move that we approve claims tonight in the amount of $1,187,000. I'm sorry, $120,087.35. I'm having a great evening.
And
Sorry.
I second. I will call the roll. Crone?
Aye.
Cox Deckard, aye. Motion passes. And if there's nothing else, then I will call for adjournment.